The ball is still in the air. That's where this story actually begins. Not in a press conference, not in a ranking chart, not in headline. In the half-second after contact, when a running cross-court forehand leaves the racket at an angle that shouldn't work, on center court, on the 4th of July, 2026, and nobody in the stadium is sure yet whether it's going to land. The scoreboard reads 6-2 in the second set. Third match point. She has already saved 4 break points just to get to this game. The first set took an hour and 24 minutes and ended in a tiebreak that ran to 11 points to 9, with set points saved along the way. And on the other side of the net, the defending Wimbledon champion, a 6-time Grand Slam winner who lifted this same trophy 12 months earlier, is stranded on the wrong side of the court, watching the ball travel, unable to reach it. Then it lands. Then the roar comes. And then, quietly and permanently, a record book rewrites itself. Here's what the headline version of this story leaves out. The word upset is doing far too much work, and not nearly enough at the same time. Yes, Alex Eala came into this match as the 29th seed facing the 3rd seed. Yes, the gap on paper was enormous. But the real story isn't one afternoon. It's a ceiling, one that no Filipino tennis player, man or woman, had ever broken in the entire open era of the sport, a history stretching back to 1968. Before this week, no Filipino player had ever won a Wimbledon main draw match. Eala broke that in the first round. No Filipino player had ever reached the 3rd round of a Grand Slam in the open era. She broke that in the second round. No Filipino player had ever reached the second week of a major. She broke that by reaching the 4th round. And then she walked on a center court and beat the defending champion. 4 ceilings. 5 days. And by the time that forehand landed inside the line, there was nothing left standing above her. Think about the order those ceilings fell in. Not spread across a career, not accumulated over a decade of near misses, but stacked one on top of the other inside a single fortnight, each one clearing the way for the next to even be possible. A player doesn't stumble into that sequence. A player builds toward it, whether anyone outside her team is watching closely enough to notice or not. To understand how she got to that specific point, on that specific court, you need 2 numbers side by side. 16 months earlier, Eala walked onto a hard court in Miami ranked 140th in the world. She was 19. She was a wild card. And she beat this same opponent for the first time, a result the tennis world treated, at the time, as a curiosity. The kind of thing that happens once, when a young player catches a champion on an off day. It was noted, discussed for a news cycle, and then set aside. 16 months later, she walked onto center court at Wimbledon as the 29th seed, ranked 32nd in the world, with a career high of 29 reached earlier that season, and she beat the same player again. This time in the 3rd round of a Grand Slam, on grass, with the defending title on the line. And almost nobody who had been paying attention to the grass season was actually surprised. Because the road from that Miami wild card to this Wimbledon seeding wasn't a spike, or a fluke, or a lucky draw. It was 400 days of deliberate, upward, unglamorous progress. That progress had a shape long before it had a Wimbledon result. 6 weeks before the tournament, Eala won a grass court title in Birmingham, coming back from a set down in the final to lift the trophy. From there she went to Berlin and beat 2 top 10 players on the same surface in back-to-back matches, the world number 2 and the world number 8. By the time she arrived in London, she had already beaten 3 top 10 opponents on grass that season, before the tournament had even started. Which means when she stepped on a center court to face the defending champion, she wasn't discovering her grass game in real time. She was deploying a version of it that had already been tested, refined, and proven against elite competition. The Wimbledon draw simply got the finished version. Notice, too, what those results were built on. Not one flattering scoreline against a struggling opponent, but 3 separate wins over top 10 players on the exact surface she was about to compete on again, spread across 2 different tournaments, in the weeks immediately before the one that mattered most. That's not a hot streak. A hot streak burns out under scrutiny. This held up under it, match after match, against opponents who had every incentive and every ability to expose a weakness if one existed. Before that first ball was struck, one of the sport's own had already flagged her. In a preview interview ahead of the grass season, Hall of Famer Kim Clijsters was asked, unprompted, to name a player worth watching on the women's side. Her answer was Eala, pointing specifically to a result during the grass swing and calling it the kind of win that makes you take notice. That comment landed before the Wimbledon draw, before the 3rd round, before any of this was a story. It was a scouting report, not a reaction. But the run-up wasn't a straight line of confidence, and it matters that it wasn't. 1 week before Wimbledon, on grass, in Bad Hamburg, Eala lost in the opening round in straight sets, a routine, one-sided result with no obvious silver lining. There was no visible thread connecting that Tuesday afternoon to what would happen a week later. Just a first-round exit, and a flight to London. In a press conference during the tournament, she was asked, not about that specific loss, but generally, what she loves most about professional tennis. She answered without pausing to choose her words carefully. She said she loves facing pressure moments head-on. She said she loves coming out of those moments stronger than when she went in. She said this 2 days before she beat the defending champion. The pressure moment, in other words, was already on the schedule. She was already describing how she planned to meet it. Now to the match itself, because the numbers deserve to be said plainly and without exaggeration, because they don't need any. The first set alone ran longer than some completed best-of-3 matches, an hour and 24 minutes, decided by a 20-point tiebreak that Eala won 11-9, saving set points along the way. That is not a set won through chaos or a fortunate bounce. That is a set won by the player who was cleaner under pressure and more willing to go through the point rather than around it. The second set confirmed what the first had only suggested. After a lengthy break, Eala came out and broke serve immediately, then broke again to build a double break. The champion fought back, broke once and threatened again, before sending a backhand volley wide at 15-40 on her own serve. The double break was restored. 6-2. Match over. The statistics settle the only question an upset like this invites. Was it real, or was it luck? Eala broke serve 5 times across 2 sets. She won 68% of points played on her opponent's second serve, meaning nearly 7 times out of 10, the safety net of a second delivery turned into a point against the server, not for her. And the unforced error count tells the rest of it. 21 for Eala, 44 for the defending champion. A gap of 23 doesn't happen by accident. It happens because one player is applying a level of pressure that makes errors close to inevitable. There's something worth sitting with in how her opponent talked about this matchup beforehand. Asked about facing Eala on grass, she admitted, honestly, that she didn't know this version of her game particularly well. They played twice before, once each on hard court and clay, a win apiece, but grass was new ground. That isn't a champion being dismissive. It's a champion naming a real gap in her own preparation, one that the scoreline would go on to confirm. Then came the moment after the match that traveled even further than the result itself. Still catching her breath at the microphone, Eala talked about being a kid, going to the courts every day after school with her brother and her grandfather, wearing ruffled socks and shoes that lit up when she walked, chubby-cheeked, and simply in love with hitting a tennis ball, long before any of this was a career. Then she said, "It goes out to all the little girls with ruffled socks and chubby cheeks. It means the world." That isn't a rehearsed line. That's a 21-year-old, in the single biggest moment of her professional life, choosing to speak directly to the version of herself that existed before any of it was possible, and telling every child who resembles that version that they're on the same road, just at a different point on it. The cultural weight of this result can't be separated from the sporting one, and it shouldn't be. The Philippines is a country of 110 million people with tennis infrastructure that has never run deep, and no real history as a pipeline for professional players. What the sports institutions gave Eala was modest. What she and her family built around that was not. At 13, she left home to train at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca. In her own words afterward, she and her team are the ones who've spent 12 hours a day at the courts, waking early and coming home late. Nobody pushed her there. She and the people around her pulled themselves to it. That's why what happened this week reads less like a single achievement, and more like a permission slip, issued by one person to everyone behind her. It tells a 9-year-old picking up a racket for the first time in Manila or Cebu, or Davao, that the ceiling they were told existed doesn't. Cameras at Wimbledon caught Filipino fans gathered on Henman Hill during the match, holding their breath in real time, 7,000 miles from home, but very much there. That's not an online reaction. That's a diaspora with a physical footprint at the All England Club. There's one more detail worth including, because she chose to explain it herself, before any of this happened. During her second-round press conference, before the tiebreak, before the third match point, before any of it, Eala translated a Tagalog phrase stitched into the back of her Nike visor. In her own words, "Once it grows, it cannot be stopped." She had those words sewn in before the tournament began. Looking back at the fortnight now, it reads less like motivation and more like a diagnosis of something that had been building for years. In Mallorca, in the junior ranks, In a wildcard win in Miami that the sport moved past too quickly, in Birmingham and Berlin during a grass season, most people weren't watching closely enough. None of that guarantees what happens next. A quarterfinal is a different opponent, a different set of margins, a different day entirely, and professional tennis has never rewarded anyone for assuming the last result carries over automatically. But something has shifted that doesn't reset with the draw. Before this fortnight, the conversation around Eala was about potential, about what she might become if enough things broke her way. After it, the conversation is about what she has already proven she can do, under the specific pressure of the specific stage that tends to separate the two most clearly. The round of 16 is done. The quarterfinal is next. Eala isn't a wild card who wandered into the second week. She's the 29th seed, ranked 32nd in the world, listed on the order of play as someone the schedule now treats as a center court fixture, because the people running this tournament understand exactly what they have. Whatever the quarterfinal brings, whatever the grass asks of her next, she's already told us how she feels about pressure. She loves it. She said so 2 days before she beat the defending champion. The story is still moving. Stay with it, because whatever happens next, you'll want to have been here when the point decided it.